Soda crackers are also known as saltines, originally a brand name that over time became a generic term. You can eat them plain or spread something on them or crumble them into soup. Doctors even recommend eating soda crackers when you're nauseous because they're dry and easy to digest. They're flatter and bumpy on the outside with a tasty texture resulting from some interesting chemical actions. Workers first dump ice into a trough to prevent the dough from overheating during fermentation. The first ingredient is the amount of finished dough. To kickstart the fermentation of this new batch, to that they add water, wheat flour, yeast and enzymes to help the fermentation. A mixer blends the ingredients for about 5 minutes. They let the dough sit for 16 hours while the enzymatic tests break down the starch and the wheat into simple sugars. The yeast then reacts with those sugars, producing carbon dioxide gas, which makes the dough rise. Then they adjust the fermented dough's pH level with sodium bicarbonate to produce the right flavor, color and shelf life. Then for additional flavoring, some salt, malted barley flour and vegetable oil. Then the mixer remixes the dough for roughly 5 minutes to combine all the new additions. Now they leave the dough to culture again for 6 hours. The baking soda works to neutralize acidity. This makes and relaxes elements so that the dough can now be stretched in such a way that when it was broken, so to speak, this is precisely the right country for soda crackers. A press then pumps out the solid dough into a laminate that's 2 in thick, folded over twice. This folding creates the light and flaky layers inside the cracker. The dough sheet then goes through a series of rollers that reduce it to its final thickness, about 1 millimeter. Revolving die cuts the cracker shapes, perforations and all the little pins puncture the dough and push it firmly onto the conveyor belt. This keeps the dough from deforming when moisture and gases escape. From there the sheet passes under a shower of applause. Salt. The sheet now takes a 3-minute trip through a long oven with different temperature zones. Gas flames bake the dough from above and below. The heat transforms the sodium bicarbonate in the dough into carbon dioxide gas, which then breaks through and escapes. This drives out trapped moisture and forms blisters in the crackers. As the sheet of baked crackers leaves the oven, a roller breaks it into rows. The rows then run from one conveyor belt to the next, stacking like roof shingles. Alignment wheels keep them straight until the next set of wheels gently breaks the rows into individual crackers. Each row makes its way through a series of gates that guide it onto a track that leads to the packaging equipment. The crackers are standing up now and the machine starts to sort them by the number of crackers per package. In this case, those little 2 cracker packs you always get with the cracker pairs go into the wrapping machine, which places them between a sheet of printed plastic film. The wheel then simultaneously seals and cuts the wrapper between each pair. This all happens at an astonishing rate of 525 packages per minute, and that's the way the cracker crumbles. The ice cream cone is the original edible container invented over ice cream cones a century ago. It adds crunch to the melt-in-your-mouth taste of ice cream, and it's one container that doesn't end up in the trash can, so you could say it adds a bit of virtue to the guilty pleasure of the double scoop. The first ice cream cones were rolled waffles, and today's cones are simply modern versions of that waffle cone. Batter starts with a lot of dark brown sugar. Caramel coloring is added along with some secret flavoring ingredients. Water is piped into the blender. It's ice cold to keep the batter from getting too sticky. A computer controls the addition of flour from a tank on the floor above. Vegetable oil is added as a giant beater. The cones fall down a chute and ride an open elevator up and down to cool and harden. The waffle cones slide down another chute and move into lanes on a conveyor. Automated fingers help guide them into paper. A computer with a camera eye counts the cones and sends a message to a machine that stacks them in the right increments. Here a technician activates a device that pushes on a ball inside a cone to test the cone's breaking point. Looks like this waffle cone can hold up to some heavy licking over in the sugar cone department. The baking plate system is constructed differently. It creates patties that are fan-shaped and have a flat edge. This shape combined with a stiffer batter means sugar cones are more robust than waffle cones, so they're a lot more popular for hard ice cream packers. Arrange the cones in styrofoam trays, then the packages travel through a curtain of high-density polyethylene film. A hot sealer seals the wrapping job. An X-ray machine sends information about the contents to a computer that counts the cones and alerts inspectors to any problems. Next, automated arms pick up cartons and open them so the packs of cones can be inserted. But there's still one more cone variety in the works: colorful cake cones. Cake cones are less sugary than other varieties and have a more cake-like texture. Batter is pumped into upright cake cones are made a little different to waffle and sugar cones due to them having flat instead of pointed bottoms. Metal core is thrust into the molds to finalize. This gives the cake cone a lovely crispy texture. Cones get baked as they pass down a tunnel gauntlet of gas heaters and then off down a chute and straight to the packing station. Unlike the other cones, cake cones come out flaky and crispy without a cooling down period. A mechanical arm picks up paper sleeves and drops them in front of the cones. These cones are now on their way to an ice cream stand near you where they'll be used to scoop up ice cream lickety. Split as early as the 1400s, Africans made peanut stews. Peanut butter as we peanut butter know it today was invented in 1890 by an American doctor. He used it as a protein substitute for people whose teeth were so bad they couldn't chew meat. The best peanuts for making peanut butter are runner peanuts because they're uniform in size. They roast more evenly than peanuts that vary in size. They arrive at the peanut butter factory already shelled. To make an 18-ounce jar of peanut butter, it takes 20 ounces of peanuts. That's about 1 peanuts. The first step is to roast them. The nuts travel through a hot air roaster heated to 399 degrees. The shaking motion moves them around so they roast evenly. Almost 4 tons of peanuts go through this roaster per hour. When they come out, they've turned from white to light brown. Next, they pass through another machine which rapidly cools them at room temperature using suction fans that circulate air quickly. This rapid cooling process is essential. It stops the cooking and prevents the peanuts from losing too much oil. Next, the peanuts pass through a machine called the blancher. It removes the outer skins by rubbing them between rubber belts. Then it splits the kernels and takes out the peanut heart, which has a bit of a bitter taste. But what's not good enough to be sold isn't wasted. The skins are sold to farmers for pig feed, and the hearts to use in bird feed. Peanuts fall into a huge stainless steel hopper. From there they just drop down into the grinder to be ground into a paste. At this point the other ingredients go in: salt, sugar or another natural sweetener, and a small amount of hydrogenated vegetable oil which acts as a stabilizer to keep the peanut oil from separating and floating to the top of the jar. Peanut butter contains no artificial coloring or artificial sweeteners. It has no preservatives either, yet doesn't need to be refrigerated. The peanut butter is finally ready. All that mixing has heated it up to 148 degrees F. It goes through a cooling system to bring it down to 108 degrees. Now it can go into jars. Peanut butter is a healthy protein-rich food with plenty of vitamins, minerals and fiber. It has no cholesterol, but it does contain fat. The good news is that more than 80% of that fat is unsaturated. In other words, good fat that may actually help in lowering certain levels of cholesterol in the blood. The bad news is that the rest of the fat content is trans fat or bad fat. It comes not from the peanuts themselves but from the hydrogenated vegetable oil that's used as the stabilizer to keep the peanut oil from separating. If you want to avoid that, you can eat all natural peanut butter, which does not contain a stabilizer. You'll just have to stir the peanut oil that collects at the top of the jar. Once the jars are filled with peanut butter, they go through the capping machine. The caps have an aluminum seal inside. As the caps pass through a heat machine, the seal drops down and adheres to the top of the jar, creating an airtight seal. A machine prints the production date and the expiration date. These unopened jars of peanut butter will stay fresh for one whole donut's year. Donuts used to be called oily cakes because they were deep fried in pork fat. When Dutch pilgrims first brought them to America, they were ball-shaped, but then someone found that removing a nut of dough from the center helped them cook far more evenly, and so the donut was born. In the world of donuts there are two basic types: yeast donuts and cake donuts. The batter for cake donuts drops from the mixer right into boiling vegetable oil. The nozzles shape the dough as it passes. The donuts fry for about a minute and a half, then a conveyor carries them out of the vat to cool. Yeast donuts donuts take longer to make. A high-speed mixer works the yeast, then workers pull it off the machine into bins. From there it goes into a hopper that extrudes the dough as a sheet, but then it's onto another conveyor belt where a series of rollers flatten the dough sheet to just 3/4 of an inch thick. The sheet passes under a shower of cinnamon, then hits a rotating cylinder that rolls it onto a log. A small metal rod sprinkles the dough with water. This keeps it sticky enough to hold its shape while going under another flattening roller. A dusting of cornstarch keeps the dough from sticking to the blade that now cuts it into pieces. A retractable arm drops the blocks of dough 4 at a time onto wire mesh trays, then it's off to the proofer, a machine much like a large bread box in which heat and humidity help the yeast de-rise. This leavening process takes about 20 minutes, during which time the trays, over 300 of them, rise and fall, and then out into the fryer. A sash slows the donuts down just before the fall, so they slide in without splashing scalding oil. Gas burners maintain a constant simmer, any less and the donuts would emerge half done at about the middle are turns, so they cook fairly throughout. After 2 minutes the donuts exit the fryer and pass through a veil of sweet glaze. A powerful air current blows off the excess and these fry cakes are now ready to be eaten. They slowly cool as they twist through the production area on their way to packaging. Now let's see how they make donuts with filling. A machine splits the yeast dough into small blobs, then sends them rolling down plastic tunnels. This shapes them first into pucks, then into round dough balls. Rollers then flatten the balls before they enter the proofer to rise. There's cornstarch everywhere to prevent the dough from sticking to the machinery or to the conveyor belt. Row after row of donuts fry in hot oil, then slide into a large drum that tumbles them around, covering them with a sugary coating. Now it's time for the donuts to get filled. Those nozzles inject just the right amount of jelly. Each worker fills 45 donuts a minute. After filling, these donuts, known as Bismarcks, are ready to go onto packaging. They're just one of the many delicious varieties that this factory turns out on a daily basis. We don't know exactly when popcorn first exploded onto the snack scene, but popcorn, it was likely thousands of years ago. Popcorn grains dating back nearly 5,600 years have been discovered in caves in New Mexico and down through the ages. This unique grain just keeps popping up. Nothing says it's showtime like a big bowl of popcorn. This grain has certainly made it big in the entertainment biz. This success story has its roots on the farm of course. Popcorn is one of 6 types of corn, and it's the only kind that pops. They even breed the popcorn plant to enhance traits like color, taste, and ability. By fall the crop is ready to harvest. Peeling back the husks reveals kernels that are smaller and harder than those of other corn. At harvesting, popcorn has moisture content of 16 to 20%. That's a bit too high, so to bring it down to 14%, they condition the crop in these giant bins, pumping warm air up through it to accelerate the drying. It's a critical step. Popcorn that's too dry may not pop, and if it's too wet it could spoil. When stored in this factory, a series of oscillating screens sift chunks of cob and broken kernels out of the popcorn. Vacuum pipes pull the finer impurities to a dust collector and suck the larger impurities into a chute. They end up in a waste bin to be discarded or used in animal feed. At this junction the system funnels the filtered popcorn in one direction and the impurities in another. It's the perfect opportunity to see the difference between the two streams. The purification process continues at the gravity table. Its vibrating action with powerful fans cause the kernels to rise and float on air. In the process of doing so, kernels that are too heavy or too light gravitate away from the middle and are shunted off to the side. The grains in the middle of the mass are the correct size, but leaving nothing to chance. They are screened one more time. The kernels now move into a very different kind of disorder. Inside the kernels fly by an electric sheet. It detects remaining debris or defective grains. The machine sends a blast of air to get rid of them. It's time to test the sample of the production run. He pours in a half pound of kernels along with some oil. As the pot reaches 46 degrees F, the water in the kernel starts to steam. As the pressure builds, those kernels explode and turn inside out. This reveals the starchy part of the kernel and creates a white fluffy puff. To pass this test, the popcorn has to expand 44½ times the original volume. The tester loads the pop puffs into a tube with measurements on it, and this batch of popcorn is right on the mark. As you can see, a little bit of popcorn can truly make quite the way from a size kernel to a puffy white treat in a matter of minutes. And although popcorn kernels come in a range of colors, that starchy part that is exposed by popping is always white. Now, it's all in the packaging. Maintaining the right amount of moisture in every kernel is critical. Heat sealing the bag locks in the grains to keep them from drying out on a store shelf. This paper bag, bound for the concession market like movie theaters, is multi-layered. It includes a vapor barrier to control moisture loss. It's taken 6 months to grow this popcorn and a couple of weeks more to process it, but it will all be worth it at snack time, because when these grains explode into a mountain of munchies, there should be enough for the whole gang. Before refrigeration, ice cream was ice cream treats. A handmade luxury. Ingredients went into a mixing bowl inside a tub filled with ice and salt water. The salt helped the ice absorb heat, cooling the mixture to below freezing. In the 1920s, commercial freezers made mass production possible, and the ice cream industry was born. To make ice cream treats, you first have to make the ice cream. It all begins with fresh cream. The factory stores it in refrigerated silos set just a few degrees above freezing. The silos feed a high-speed mixer that blends the cream with other ingredients. The main dry ingredients are powdered skim milk and plant-based stabilizers and emulsifiers. Stabilizers prevents ice cream from crystallizing, and emulsifiers allows the mix to blend with air during the whipping process. The other ingredients are sugar and corn syrup. After about 3 minutes of mixing, a pumping system transfers the mixture into pasteurization tanks and heats it to 162 degrees for half an hour, killing all the bacteria and activating the stabilizers. Then the factory homogenizes the blend, a procedure that breaks up the fat globules, giving the ice cream a smooth texture. The blend is cooled and concentrated vanilla flavoring is added. Then the concoction is chilled and whipped for about 15 seconds. Dipping blends the mix with air, transforming it from a liquid to a soft solid without air. The finished product would come out looking like frozen milk rather than ice cream. The ice cream sandwich wafers are made of chocolate cake ingredients. A filling machine feeds 2 lines of wafers toward an injection pipe. Just as 2 wafers come together, the machine injects 1/3 of a cup of vanilla ice cream in between the pipe's head, shapes the ice cream into a rectangular slab that fits perfectly between the wafers. All this occurs at a pace of 140 ice cream sandwiches per minute. As the sandwiches go on to packaging, the filling is still ice cold from the freezing phase, so there is no danger of a meltdown. The packaging system hoists each sandwich into a wrapper, then folds and tacks the ends. The next machine counts the sandwiches and places them in boxes. Once closed, the boxes go straight into a storage freezer at 22 degrees. On another line, ice cream cone production is on a feeder. Drops pre-wrapped sugar cones into holders on a conveyor. Belly sprayers coat the insides with a chocolatey layer, which adds flavor and creates a barrier between the cone and ice cream, so the cone remains crispy until you eat it. Next, nozzle squirt in the ice cream filling. One production line, 2 flavors. One row of cones gets vanilla ice cream, the other row chocolate. Now for a tasty surprise, in the cone's core, an injection of liquid caramel. This factory also makes ice cream cones with chocolate and strawberry sauce inside next to chocolate-flavored liquid topping. Then the crunchy finishing touch, a layer of chocolate-coated puff tries. Finally, the cones move under a lid dispenser that applies a wax-coated paper lid to each one. A heating element instantly melts the wax, sealing the lid to the cone's paper sleeve. From here, the ice cream cones go into boxes, then straight into the freezer, ready to take. Collecting the waffle started out in the Middle Ages as a flat wafer made, not frozen waffles from wheat flour but from oats or barley. As its popularity spread throughout Europe, many variations of shape and recipe developed. The introduction of leavening ingredients gave rise to the fluffy honeycomb breakfast cake we know today. The introduction of frozen waffles in the 1950s marked the dawn of a new era for these breakfast batter cakes. Making your morning waffles was suddenly a snap. All the big prep work takes place at the factory. They add flavorings like berries to a flour-based waffle mix and then turn to the liquid ingredients ingredients: water, canola oil, and liquid cane sugar. They pour them into a big tank and mix thoroughly, then they're ready to thicken it into a batter with the flour-based waffle premix. It also includes baking powder, which reacts with water to cause pockets of carbon dioxide to form for a leaving effect that will continue during baking. After adding more berries, this batter is complete, and there's enough in this one tank to produce 3,600 waffles. Hot waffle irons move past a sprayer for misting with a non-stick coating down the line. An automated pump deposits measured amounts of batter onto each grid plate. The top grid plates encase the batter. This production line is computerized, which ensures the plates are filled quickly and without any spills. As they move towards the oven, the waffle irons rotate, allowing the batter to reach all the crevices inside. They now move through a long gas oven. It takes about 2 minutes for them to cook. They emerge from the oven piping hot, where a machine called a picking drum removes them from the irons. As the picking drum revolves, needles grab the waffles and pull them off the hot grid plates. The picking drum transports the waffles up to another level. The needles retract, transferring to a series of conveyors at the other side of the factory. The waffles enter a blast freezer. The temperature inside is 98 degrees F. Fans blow frigid air onto the waffles. As they spiral through the freezer, it takes just 20 minutes to freeze and preserve these freshly baked waffles. The frozen waffles now merge into lanes to be sorted for stacking. A kind of trapo system releases them 3 at a time to grippers that move them onto a conveyor. The conveyor lane narrows, which forces the waffle stack into a single row. A sensor-activated gate releases the stacks 2 at a time to the packaging station. It takes just a second for the 2 stacks of frozen waffles to be wrapped and sealed in a tight cellophane packet. Then it's into a metal detector. To demonstrate how it works, we place a quarter on one of the packages. The system senses it immediately, and a blower blasts the package off. The conveyor's suctioning fingers now pick up the outer paperboard box and open it. As they place it on the conveyor, a ram then shoves the wrapped waffles into the box. Incredibly, they turn out more than 8,600 waffles an hour at this factory, catering to different tastes and dietary requirements, and that merits a toasting.